Hello, my name is Carrie Parmenter, and I'm the Lower Wabash Project Director for the Nature Conservancy. I will be presenting today about our efforts to conduct an ecosystem enhancement planning for the Lower Wabash River. This project began in January of 2024, and it was comprised of three components. The first was to conduct a series of landowner meetings and partner meetings in the counties immediately adjacent to the Wabash River. We were assessing the barriers that the communities are facing to adopting conservation and looking at current funding that is available through our partners. The second was a mapping project with the CBEC Engineering using their product, which is called Ecological Floodplain Inundation Mapping, or EcoFIP. We will spend most of our time today discussing this aspect of the planning process. The third component that we used was an assessment of the Huck 8 and Huck 12 watersheds using USGS's Sparrow modeling to rank those watersheds according to potential nutrient loading. We also used the Freshwater Resilient River Explorer tool through the Nature Conservancy to look at their freshwater resilient and connected network in the Lower Wabash. We used that to see how their ranking correlated with the work that we were doing with our Habitat Suitability Index criteria. The FRCN uses there were three different classes that existed within the Wabash River domain. The first was protect resilient areas, and these are healthy systems which should be conserved in their current state. Restore, and these are systems that are impacted by infrastructure or water management strategies. And then restore flow and condition. And these systems are not only impacted by the infrastructure, but they are also exhibiting habitat degradation or water quality concerns. So whenever we did the EcoFIP modeling, there are three tiers to that, and this is an example of Tier 1. They compared activation levels for modeled flows to determine the areas that were most likely to receive water on the landscape under current flow regimes. Starting with the Tier 1, CBEC started with a digital elevation and hydraulic model. Hydraulic models were used to simulate the river flow and how high the water gets at a given flow and how it interacts with the landscape in terms of velocity and inundation extents. HEC-RAS models exist for the entire Wabash River from Terre Haute all the way down to the Ohio River, and that was used in this effort. The EcoFIP tool also has the ability to model not only what the actual inundation is, but the potential inundation. So in this map, you can see that they were able to show the areas that are currently connected to the Wabash River, and then those areas that are historic floodplains that are disconnected from the river. So in Tier 2, we were able to create a set of criteria that was looking at the habitat suitability based on some species that TNC was interested in prioritizing. So we ranked areas of the river based on the suitable water depths and the frequency of inundation, and we worked with a series of professionals that help to inform us as to what the suitable depth should be for waterfowl, shorebirds, and then we also just looked at general wetland conditions. And then we also layered onto that some prioritization that TNC had set. So we looked at parcels that were over 2.5 acres, that had hydric soils present, that were not currently protected yet had proximity to protected lands. And then TNC also has a priority to restore oxbow lakes in the Lower Wabash. So those properties received a higher score. We also work very closely with the NRCS Wetland Reserve Easement Program. And so we had a separate layer that we used to prioritize properties that had the potential to meet the NRCS standards for the WRE program. So that included looking at the active mineral leases, hydric soils, whether the land use was agricultural. So that was another set of criteria that we used to help prioritize the parcels. So these layers that are shown on this map were used as inputs. So you can see that we used the hydric soils layer, we had a protected lands layer, we included oxbow lakes, etc. And so that was put with, for the NRCS prioritization, we also added active oil wells. And those orange dots that you see on the map now, those are the location of oil wells. That was the layer that we could find that we thought would inform us best as to where there may be active oil leases. So then the resulting prioritization map included parcel data, so we can look at the properties all the way down to the parcel scale and identify who the landowners are of those parcels. So this is looking at what the actual conditions are currently for the general wetlands, and this is without any of the metrics set by a TNC or by the NRCS prioritization. And then the EcoFIP model has the ability to look at what the potential is if we were to restore hydrology to the floodplains. And so this map is showing what it could look like, or what the potential is for wetland restoration on those sites. So we also have the ability to look at what TNC would prioritize. We can look at the wetlands, we can look at the waterfowl, we can look at shorebirds. So we have 3 different sets of criteria that we can look at. And this is what the TNC, just general wetland restoration, would look like in the actual condition currently. And then this is what it could look like, what the potential is for wetland restoration in this area. So if we overlay the FRCN with the Habitat Suitability Index, which is what we use to prioritize our sites, you can see that there is some overlap. The majority of the sites fell into the restore, flow, and condition. So the numbers that are underneath there are the percentage of the area that had that score on EcoFIP that fell into that category. And you can see underneath the protect column that these resilient areas, the higher score that we gave it, it also is the areas that the FRCN had identified as being areas that needed to be protected. So we used all of the information to come up with a list of prioritized restoration sites. So the greens and blues, those sites are ones that if we would restore the land use to wetlands, that we would be able to get restoration done on those without they are currently connected to the river and have the hydrology. The yellows, orange, and reds are ones that we would need to connect back to the river to be able to restore that hydrology. So we also sorted them by the number of landowners, because we know that the more landowners that you're working with, the more complicated it can become for restoration projects. So we, in Tier 3, we were able to narrow it down to 2 sites that we took a little bit further and just really kind of looked into the details about what it would take to be able to restore a couple of different properties. And so this site here that we were looking at is the hash marks that are on there is the Fairbanks Landing Fish and Wildlife Area that is managed by the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. And there was a levee breach that happened a few years ago, so that property had been flooded, and so then the DNR came in and they were able to restore that into a fish and wildlife area. The area to the north ranked very high because there are still some of those internal levees. Some of those have breached in the past, and so those properties flood frequently. So this is what it actually looks like in this current condition. And then if you look at what the potential is, we actually have the potential to reconnect about 11,000 acres of floodplain in that northern section. So whenever you look at the Resilient River Explorer tool and this site, you can see that a lot of the properties that were highlighted and as being potential restoration sites also fall into the Protect Resilient category and the Restore category. So if you look at those side by side, you can see that those dark purple ones that EcoFIP had identified as being high potential also are on the RCN layer. So Tier 3, the engineering firm, actually took some modeling and then looked at what types of engineering practices could be done to bring that inundation into that site. And so that would involve some levee breaches. And the way that it is set up currently, there are levees that go around a lot of the properties that are privately owned, and those it does lend itself well so that internal drains could be retrofitted with water control structures so that we could have active management, water management on the site. So the mapping, along with the results from the landowner meeting and from the HUC 12 prioritization, have been compiled into this ecosystem enhancement planning report that we have received just in January, so we've only had it a month now. And we are in the process of creating a partnership organization that's going to have work teams, and we're going to be working through this plan and tackling some of these implementation strategies in these priority locations. Thank you for your attention today.